at aaronjudkins.com, there's a question. Who are the guardians of Göbekli? Göbekli Tepe, one of the most puzzling archaeological sites of the Stone Age. It is considered the oldest pre-pottery Neolithic site ever discovered. This mysterious site is changing our perception of the Neolithic, a time period just after the Younger Dryas event. Is there a connection to the heavens and the gods? Do its symbols represent the earliest known language? It's the paradigm that's changing the paradigm. Who are these guardians of Göbekli? Get the new book and find out. Guardians of Göbekli at www.aaronjudkins.com. Coming to you from the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network newsroom, I'm Guy Ticker with the strange news. Dogs living in Chernobyl have adapted with DNA mutations. A study suggests that scientists have discovered hints that Chernobyl's stray dogs may have adapted to their unusually toxic habitat on a core genetic level, a finding that could have implications for understanding the risks of chemical and radiation exposure on wildlife and on people. I'm Guy Ticker. The Strange News is brought to you by Night Dreams Talk Radio Network. Do you have a strange story? Contact us at nightdreamstalkradio.com. You are listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, the home of Night Dreams Talk Radio, with Gary Anderson, syndicated worldwide. Paranormal Talk Radio, like you remember.
Well, we're back for another night, of entertainment tonight. It's going to be a great show. We're going to be talking about, ETs. A lot of them. Well, JC, have you been staying out of trouble? What I've been hearing about you, I don't know.
I do not recall.
I would take the fifth on that one. Do you know a trucker captures with his dash cam footage of a ghost walking on the side of the road?
Yes, I have seen that, and I don't know what to think about it. I've seen a couple different ones too, but I did see that on a lonely stretch of highway.
Yeah, why not Mothman, but a ghost? That's possible. Could you imagine, right? You're driving on a lonely road at night. You see this beautiful woman walking on the side of the road about 2 o'clock in the morning. The moon is out. It's kind of eerie. And you figure, you don't want this poor lady walking down the road. So you pull over. She gets in your vehicle. Now you have a conversation like, "Hi, my name is Ted. What's yours?" Joanne. "Well, Ted, what's your last name?" "Bundy." I just thought I'd throw that in. But, the thing is, you have a conversation for a few minutes. And then when you go to change the radio dial, you go back to ask her another question, and she's not in the vehicle.
Yes, listen, there's a allegedly true story about the white lady in that famous cemetery in Chicago where the guy picks her up, takes her to the address, goes to look over, and she's not there. And then the other one drops her off, and it's a cemetery. He goes to look at her, and she disappears again.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I want to eat pancakes anymore. The reason why I'm saying this, back years ago, the U.S. Air Force once investigated a case of an alien who made pancakes for a witness.
Yes, I remember that story. Matter of fact, it's resurfaced. So, yeah, it's weird looking pancakes. It looks more like waffles.
Wow. But wouldn't it be nice, though, to have a visitor from off-world that can make you breakfast?
Yeah, well, I would be a little hesitant to eat it, but yeah, that would be a change of pace, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, it might not be milk in it. It could be something else.
That's right. And listen, you've always got that seed planted in my head to serve man. So when an alien says, "Hey, I want to, have you over for dinner,"
I'm ready for the invasion. I got a whole pantry full of barbecue sauce, every type of one you could ever want. Now, I have to make a decision. Are they going to use that on us, or are we going to use that on the ETs? Figure that one out, my friend.
Yeah, well, the key is to get one that they might not like the taste of too well.
Yeah, the taste of man. It was a guy years ago. The ship went down, and there was a couple of survivors. And the way he survived, they would start eating the dead or the near dead. They would start eating flesh. And they asked the guy. I remember the interview, and this is back in the early 50s. This took place. They asked, "What does human flesh taste like?" And he said, "It tastes kind of sweet."
Yeah, I remember there's several stories like that. It's like the Donner Party at sea almost. But listen, they're desperate. You after a while, you got to do something.
I don't know. I don't know if I could eat another person. They made a movie of a true story. This plane crashed in the Andes.
Yeah.
But they started turning into cannibals. They were eating the dead, and then they were looking at people that were about ready to die while there's dinner. They didn't realize this right over that snowdrift was, guess what? A lodge. A lodge with people.
Yes. And here's the thing. You imagine the scenario, sitting around the fire that you struggle to get, and everybody's kind of looking at everybody, and are they thinking, you're looking good? Like that cartoon where it's got that thing above their head and it shows a roasting chicken or.
Yeah. Well, if it was me, they look at me, we're not going to eat that guy. He's full of fat. Oh, they might say something else, but I can't say it over radio. Well, they got a monster was captured by camera at a dam in Mexico.
Yes, I know it. I tell you, there's all kind of things popping up, Gary, and land and sea all over. There's a couple of these sea creatures have been popping up, but I've seen that one too.
Yeah, but this is not a sea creature. This is a lake creature. Alien mothership could be watching us with probes, again, coming from somebody that says they're leaked out from the Pentagon. They've been doing this for the last 3 weeks, really heavy, haven't they?
They have been with these probes and this mothership. Again, I revert back to what Greer's kind of been saying. They plant these little seeds. It's a prelude to, lead up to a false flag potentially. And then when I hear these motherships, sending probes out, that's a scary thought in itself.
Well, and I think the word probe is like all the times I've been in the hospital lately. I tell you, I've been probed and prompted and everything else. A hole 30 times the size of the Earth has opened and spread across the sun, blasting solar winds. And hopefully, that will not hit our planet, but it could by the end of the week. So you might find internet acting up, your power acting up. It's supposed to be a bad one.
Listen, that's huge because I think it takes like 1 million Earths to equal the sun or something like that. But if it's bigger than the Earth, then that's a huge hole.
Well, 30 times.
30 times? Oh, my goodness.
30 times the size of our planet.
Wow.
That's scary.
That is scary. If we get the effects of that, we're definitely going to know it.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're going to be back with a great guest here tonight. We're going to talk, about ETs and everything involving ETs, a lot of different types of ETs and all that. And our regular guest that comes on a regular basis, Andrew, is going to really get into this really heavy tonight. So if you have any kids, you might have them go watch cartoons in the other room. We'll be back right after this.
The Disclosure 2.0 Conference in Washington, D.C. with the National Press Club event is June 10th through June 12th. Dr. Greer will share explosive witness testimony and analysis with a call for the government to open up all files on the UFO issue and get to the bottom of the secrecy. For more information on the Disclosure 2.0 Conference, go to this website, www.seriousdisclosure.com. Mark your calendar now for June 6th. On that day, The Lost Century and How to Reclaim It will be released. This is a film that documents the suppression of viable non-fossil fuel energy sources and provides a blueprint of how we can solve the environmental crisis. For more information, go to this website, www.seriousdisclosure.com. That's www.SiriusDisclosure.com. Andrew D. Basiago is a lawyer, writer, public speaker, media personality, and presidential candidate. Best known for serving as a US Crononaut in Project Pegasus, during the advent of time travel in the U.S. defense technical community, and as a U.S. astronaut in Project Mars, during the emergence of planetary exploration in the U.S. intelligence community.
Well, Andrew, I want to welcome you back to the show. How are you doing, my friend?
Good to be back. I'm excellent, Gary.
Well, a lot of things have been going on. Ever since this balloon thing, the media is just hyping up, like false maybe invasion of ETs, the stuff talking about the Pentagon supposedly is releasing garbage about, motherships and all this stuff. I tell you, the media has just gone crazy the last month.
Yeah, and I think it's time to go back like 50 years into our childhood and recover what both the ETs were doing to contact specific American children of our generation, and what we were doing to follow contactees as they were being brought in on aboard craft by the ETs. I'm aware of what those were, and so there are previously undisclosed facts that we're going to be taking a look at tonight.
How bad was it, with these children, young adults? How bad was the contact?
Well, mine began in 1967. I was in kindergarten. I entered kindergarten in 1966 at age 4 because I was born in September of 1961. In the spring of kindergarten, 2 gentlemen came to my school, Mount View Road School in Morris Plains, New Jersey, very small town, and they took 4 kids out of my kindergarten. And I never forgot that fact. They didn't take all 20 or 30 kids. They took 4 of us. They took us down the hall to a small little classroom where speech lessons would be given and instrumental music instruction would be received. And they showed us drawings, and then they would pull a transparent screen over that drawing. So let's say a drawing of a little French boy in a beret would be changed into a gray ET. And they would ask us how we felt about that picture. And so my interview went kind of, good. Oh, you feel good, Andy? Why do you feel good about this picture? And I would say, well, it's nice. And they say, well, what do you mean, Andy? What do you mean it's nice? And I would say something like, well, they're nice to me when they come in my bedroom at night. So I knew they had selected certain kids for this kind of ET screening. And I remembered those kids to, let's say, the 6th grade, so going to about 1972, when I asked those children, now in junior high school, what I thought was, my theory for why they were pulled out of class, not all the kids in class, by these 2 gentlemen interviewing us in this way about ET contact. And the first major discovery I made regarding this process of, screening American children of our generation for ET contact is that all of their fathers worked in the aerospace community. So years later, when I was interacting with CIA agents like Courtney Hunt, who was in both Project Pegasus and Project Mars with me, what I found is that the ETs were able to trace the industrial materials on our father's clothing and trace us so they could track us back to our own homes. And on that base, the children of the astronauts, the aerospace engineers like my dad and so forth, were being tracked back to their homes, and they were being contacted. So there was really a deeply political context to the way in which literally, school-age children of our generation were actually being investigated by the ETs.
That is scary, all that went on, and the government was involved with it.
Yeah, and my dad had worked beginning in 1952 on the ramjet, which was a high-performance jet that would draw oxygen in through the front of the plane and then kind of spit it out in a baffle at the back of the plane.
Right.
And in that way, it would travel at supersonic speed to chase the ET craft out of our atmosphere. He was put on that project after the famous July 1952 overflight of our nation's capital. So there were children in Morris County, New Jersey, whose dads were working, like mine was, for Curtiss Wright, for the Edison Labs, for Bell Labs. And it was one of the only counties on the East Coast that was guarded by a Nike missile battery against Soviet bombardment. So they weren't just pulling anybody's kids out of class. They were pulling out the children of the aerospace community, because they already knew by the late 1960s that the aerospace community was being followed by the ETs. The question is, how did they then follow we children when we were taken aboard the ET craft? Well, this is the first time this has been revealed in American media. What they were doing, do you recall the week of testing we would get during those years? I mean, I'm talking earliest grades.
I remember in the late 50s and early 60s, there was a lot of weird stuff that was going on in school, starting in grade school to junior high school, but mainly in grade school.
Yeah, well, in the late 1950s, Admiral Hyman Rickover, President Jimmy Carter's mentor, started something called Project Talent. That was to identify Americans of exceptional intelligence, psychic ability, and leadership ability. Because Rickover felt that the caliber of the young Americans he was getting for the Naval Academy in Annapolis was below the standard that he wanted to turn young Americans into like nuclear submarine captains. So Project Talent, Talent, would subject young Americans to a week, school week plus a Saturday morning of testing. And that was to identify those capabilities. But there was something going on there about the ET situation that every American child of our generation who was in that testing did not know they were being subjected to. Do you remember the 4-colored pens that would be given out at the end of that week of testing?
Oh, I do. Yes.
K through 5, right?
Right.
We were always expecting that once these damn tests were over, we would get that neat pen where you had a blue, a black, a red, and green ink.
Right. I remember.
And we loved that, like for Spirograph, that wonderful toy that was coming out in that era. What the young Americans of our generation, who became the Gary Andersons and the Steve Greers of the present, were not told, but fortunately I found out from the CIA as a young adult, what they had in them were transponders to identify which young Americans were being taken aboard ET craft. So that was kind of an add-on activity to Project Talent. It wasn't just to identify young Americans of exceptional IQ, psychic ability, or leadership potential. They were creating an inventory of the young Americans, many of them the children of the aerospace community, or most of them, who were literally being taken aboard ET craft. And that was via a transponder in those nifty 4-colored pens that we were getting as participants in Project Talent. Now
they were doing this, Andrew, nationally. Because I was up here in Seattle, that's where I grew up. And I remember that. I couldn't wait after that testing, honestly, to get that pin. I wanted it. They had you so convinced that pin was so important to you.
The kids just loved it, but they didn't know there was a transponder in it to track which ones were being contacted by ET, which ones were being taken. Now, I also remembered a number of things about the guys who interviewed me in kindergarten. The older guy reminded me of Jackie Gleason, but the younger officer had very angular features. He had a like a flat top haircut. And when they were interviewing me, he was leaning against the chalkboard with his chair, and I said, "Sir, you shouldn't do that. You're going to hurt your head." We had all been told about how to avoid getting occipital skull fractures from leaning back in our chairs, right? So I talked about this meeting with these guys, speculating that they were government agents. And thanks to the advent of Facebook, I described that experience, and I was able to find the son of the younger officer. In other words, I literally doubled back on my government surveillance as a contactee son of a U.S. aerospace official, and I found that they were, in fact, FBI. In fact, I got the name of the younger officer. His name was Richard Bauer Sr. I've spoken with his son many years ago, but I spoke with his son, Richie Bauer Jr., and he said his dad had just left the Navy, and he was FBI at that point. So part of the untold story of the ET present is that our FBI was investigating contact among the children of our aerospace personnel.
I got to jump in here, because here's one thing. It's bugging me. I wish you wouldn't have brought up that pin, because it's so clear now to me after you brought it up. But at that same time, they also had, I remember in grade school, they would line us up out in the field, the play field, and these dentists would look in our mouth and then give us a toothbrush and some special toothpaste. Now, did you have to go through that?
Yeah, the red dye that you put in your mouth and it changed the color of your teeth.
Right, but then they also gave you this toothpaste. They said they were insistent you had to use it.
Yeah, I do remember getting some kind of dental paste that you had to brush with.
Yeah. I wonder if that
could have been related. I don't know, but I do notice. We're living in an era in which everybody's demanding disclosure. But wait a minute. When we were little kids, there was yellow book lessons going on about the ET situation. So, for example, in the 4th grade, 1970, again, 4 or 5 of the kids in my class of 25, 30 were held back, and it was revealed to us by the government that there were 70 ET species known to be visiting us, and 4 of them most frequent. This is what I was told directly in 1970. The 4 species they were aware of were the tall grays, the small grays, the amphibians, and the Nordics. Now, they then showed us drawings that were worthy of John J. Audubon. They were immaculate, colorful, high-quality drawings of those 4 ET species. And the amphibians looked kind of like the creature of the Sleepy Lagoon. They had even a comb on their head. And the Nordics were very tall and thin and Scandinavian-looking. But I'm wondering about this sort of demand for disclosure, because I remember disclosure occurring. It was occurring to select groups of American young people. And I think in a weird way, that's now turned on upon itself, and the very people calling for disclosure actually had disclosure in childhood from their yellow book lessons and from these sort of Defense Department briefings that kids were getting about their own ET contacts, because they had the FBI involved in interviewing us.
But you think you grow up thinking that the government is here for the people, by the people, and then you look at these strange things that happen, like young people in school, in the military even. What motives do they have? I mean, besides brainwashing kids, and again, why would the government be involved in allowing young kids to be abducted and taken aboard a craft? That is really scary, Andrew, when you think about that.
I know we have to ask, well, after that questioning by FBI, And I've literally gone back, decades later and gotten the name of the younger officer, which was virtually impossible. It would not have been possible without the advent of the internet and the help of Facebook and just posting that concern about who those guys were. So I have a picture from Richie Bauer Jr. of what his dad looked like, and I said that there's no question that that's the younger officer who was apparently being trained when I was being questioned. And I even advised him about tilting his chair back against the chalkboard. And his son said that was so characteristic of his father that he would even eat dinner at night after work by leaning against the wall of their dining room. And he ate dinner that way. So I'm absolutely certain that it's FBI. But then what happened a couple of years later? I think we really have to ask what occasioned the next event. Columbus Day, 1968, I'm walking down the path to my school from our street through the woods. And one of my brothers and I are just kind of skipping and kind of this joyful, almost like we're skipping down the path. We were like, there was blustery wind and we were kind of spiritually elevated. We go around the side of the school, Mount View Road Elementary. And as we do, my spirit pops out of my body and I go and look out at the one-story roof of my school. And I saw that there were some sneakers up there that had been thrown up there. So I was later able to tell Mr. Mazzocchi, the school principal, hey, Mr. Mazzocchi, when are you going to throw down those sneakers up on the top of the school? And he said, he was an Italian immigrant. He said to me, how you know? And I said, I left my body and went up there and I saw what's on top of the school. So anyway, I went back into my body. And then we went around the next side of the school and down to an area behind the school where there was some rye grass growing, where they were flattening out the glacial tailings at the back of the school to build what would ultimately be a baseball diamond and a soccer field. And one of my older brothers said to me, hey, let's go talk to that kid down there in the tall grass. And he was much bigger than me at that time, so I followed after him. And when he got down there, I saw him quickly turn when he got to the child in the rye grass, he quickly turned to the right and said, it's not a kid and it's not a human, and started running to the right. And I then slammed into the ET standing there. And he said to me telepathically, why is your brother frightened of me? Then I heard kind of this locust sound. And as we ran up to complete the circuit around the school, I could see that there was an ET craft parked in the tall grass. I then blacked out, and I woke up aboard the craft.
Okay.
I was on one bench.
Okay, Andrew, let's hold that because we need to go a break. So we'll pick back up when you were taken aboard the craft, and we'll go from there. We'll be back with Andrew in about 90 seconds. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio. Check out our website at www.nightdreamstalkradio.com. Again, to all the people on iHeart and Apple and Spotify, well, I just want to say thank you for tuning in here tonight. We will be right back, so stay tuned.
Coming to you from the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network newsroom, I'm Guy Ticker with the strange news. Whatever caused the sudden deaths of dozens of cattle in northwest Colorado late last year remains elusive, according to officials who ended their investigation into the matter last month. The unexplained incidents received widespread media attention, giving rise to speculations involving everything from wolf depredation and soil-based pathogens to starring but unfounded claims that a mysterious creature who left no tracks was responsible for the killings. I'm Guy Ticker. The Strange News is brought to you by Night Dreams Talk Radio Network. Do you have a strange story? Contact us at nightdreamstalkradio.com.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
Night Dreams brings on the night worldwide. Did you know you can find us on your favorite app? And now you can watch us live on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and give us a thumbs up. And now, here's Gary.
And here I am with Andrew. Well, we're back, Andrew. So you were taken aboard this craft. Okay.
Right. And I woke up. My brother and I were both sleeping on separate benches. They look sort of like med lab benches you might see on the Enterprise, Star Trek. Very futuristic. And an ET, not really a small gray, but sort of a medium-sized gray, sort of floated down in the craft and interacted with us. And he gave us different colored, sort of gelatinous fruit candy. I think is the best way I can describe it. In other words, each piece of candy looked like a fruit, but they were all the wrong color, like a purple banana, an orange apple, a red orange, and so forth. And they tasted essentially like fruit, but really more like, gelatinous fruit candy of that era. And he was testing whether the candy we were being fed caused euphoria, basically, happiness. I was then interviewed or hypnotized with an itinerant instructor in our school, the Hanover Township School District, named Joseph Humer, who, like an itinerant music instructor of that era, Harvey Altman, who was also interacting with me about these extraterrestrial matters, what do you know? Both ended up principals of the local schools. Joe Humer became principal of Mount View Road Elementary, and Harvey Altman became the principal later of Memorial Middle School in Whippany, New Jersey. So an untold aspect of the ET cover-up is that the educators that the federal government put on investigating the issue of what was going on with the children of our generation were accelerated into positions of leadership in such school districts. Now, so I mentioned fourth grade, they're literally giving me a briefing that I think would qualify as disclosure. 70 species, those four most commonly, the tall grays, the small grays. And when they talked about the small grays, they said, we're sure, and showed us a sort of John J. Audubon quality illustration of that particular ET species. They said, we're sure some of you kids will recognize these because many of you are being contacted by them. They even use the word contact. And then, of course, the Nordics are the group that Bill Tompkins, formerly of Douglas Aircraft in Santa Monica, identified as the species that helped the Allies win World War II. That is some reptilian species, possibly from the Draconian star system, was helping the Axis powers, but the Nordics helped the Allies win the war. So we know that the U.S. government was aware of the ET situation in sort of a focused and sharp way during World War II, because we have Tompkins testimony about the Nordics helping the Allies win. I had contact with one tall Nordic 10 years later in 1980 when I was in training to go to Mars up at College of the Siskiyous. This woman, who clearly was not a human being, was about 7 feet tall.
Wow.
And as skinny as a rail, and as Scandinavian looking as any Nordic could be. So it's not true that disclosure has not happened, at least to some Americans, because they were literally studying, using the FBI to study, which children of the aerospace community were being contacted. And they knew one of those, at least, was entirely benevolent, and that was, of course, the Nordics. They also knew, I would find in my search for the truth, that they knew that the small grays had kick-started our civilization so that we recovered from the solar system catastrophe of 9500 BC. So I think they were assuming that the small grays, at least, were beneficent. Were not a danger to us.
What's the difference
but they didn't know.
What's the difference between the small and the regular ETs?
Well, I can certainly testify that I pushed on the body of one of the small grays, and it kind of buckled in like it was just a cyborg made of some kind of plastic or something. But I was in the presence of 2 tall grays underneath Albuquerque near the Manzano weapons storage area, and I was in Project Pegasus, because as my father stated, the aliens wanted to meet the children of our project people, and they were flesh and blood humanoids like us. They looked like Han Chinese after about 1 million years of evolution. But I'm just making the point that I'm fairly certain that they were not totally freaked out about those visiting us most frequently, because clearly there was ET liaison on Project Pegasus, the tall grays. Clearly they had determined that the small grays had played some role sort of kickstarting our civilization after it was devastated by the solar system catastrophe of 9500 BC. And they had worked with the Nordics during World War II to win the war against the Axis powers. So they clearly viewed at least those. Now, the amphibian, I don't know. All I know is it was very hideous looking, and it had the same comb on the top of its head as the creature from the Sleepy Lagoon. And that's another thing that was going on in that era, which is they were dropping state secrets of things that they were afraid of people learning in popular movies and TV programs.
Yeah, but don't forget those B movies, Andrew. They were like the one eye, alien. They were horrible creatures. That always did one thing: they took over the person's mind and controlled him by mind control, or they did horrible things to humans. Now, did any of that ever happen that you're aware of?
Well, I mean, there's been mutilation of some humans. The J.P. Lowett case, Jonathan P. Lowett case in White Sands, and the Varinhas, Brazil case. So there have been mutilations, abductions followed by mutilations of some humans by some ETs. But see, with 70 species visiting us, it's all of the above. We can't adhere to a tiddlywinks and flower type view of optimists that they're all space brothers coming here to help us.
They're
or
not?
The fearful view.
Wait a minute.
Huh?
I've had so many people, Andrew, that said they give off orbs. They're here to help mankind. And, they want to keep us from killing ourselves. They would never let a nuclear war happen. And then when I had those type of guests on, I wonder, what are they getting this information from?
Well, I think that's what we have to guard against is excessive optimism or pessimism. In other words, just as our oceans contain benevolent, neutral, and malevolent creatures like, let's say, dolphins, sturgeon, and sharks, I think because it's an organic universe, we have to expect the same kind of pattern among the ET species visiting. And by the way, we've been speaking of them as ETs in spaceships, and I'm rather convinced that we should be asking, are they interdimensionals in time ships? Because clearly Project Pegasus proved the multiverse, and therefore it's much more likely that they're spinning into this dimension from an area close to here than coming millions and gajillions of miles from space and somehow still getting here during their lifetimes. So I think it's at least as likely, if not more likely, that they're interdimensionals in time ships and not extraterrestrials in spaceships. Now, there's other people who insist, like an Alex Collier, that they insist that they know where they're from and that they're extraterrestrials from outer space, and I don't think that's been proved. And both in my father's testimony to me and in the testimony of friends and loved ones' fathers as well, my position is they didn't know where they were from, what they wanted, where they were from, who they were, or what they wanted. In fact, that's what I was tasked to achieve when I was given the briefing in the 5th grade. The briefing was basically, they said we're being visited by humanoid creatures not from here, from elsewhere in the universe. We know that they have been visiting specific human beings for several hundred years, even though they've been coming here for thousands of years. But we know they've been contacting specific human beings on Earth for several hundred years.
But what's the
and they said
But what's the purpose of contacting humans? I mean, have you figured that out? I mean, like if a ET contacts me, what good is that going to do if they don't give me some?
Well, I was tasked to actually find that out, and that's kind of one of the points I wanted to make tonight about what the government knows that it's not revealing. Many of the sort of public apparatchiks, many of sort of the cultural leaders of disclosure, they were contacted by ET, and they were also recipients of the very briefing that I was describing. In other words, as children, they were briefed on or investigated about their contact experiences, and it was put in their mind to popularize the very process that's now upon us. Some later became intel people. For example, you recently had Steve Greer on. I first met Steve Greer in 1980 at College of the Siskiyous when I was training for Mars, and he was identified as Steve of the CIA. In fact, there were a group of young trainees of CIA at the campus eatery when William Stillings and I went through it, and they identified themselves as CIA, and among them was Steve Greer. So this is a very complex public policy issue, and I'm trying to show the multiple layers of it. When you were a kid born of an aerospace-connected father, you were being contacted by ETs. And when you were being contacted by ETs, you were being interviewed by FBI. And when you were taking your week of testing by Project Talent, they were giving you that 4-colored ink pen, and it had a transponder in it to see if you were being abducted. So I think we have to realize that the very people that are urging disclosure, in many cases, are contactees, and they're contactees because of these family connections to the projects to do things like my dad was doing to chase the ETs out of our atmosphere. So the ETs were very advanced to be able to literally study the children of the aerospace community. And I wanted to describe that kindergarten experience followed by the 1st grade experience, the Columbus Day of 1968, to ask, well, if they abducted my brother and I right next to our school, and by the way, I went back there in 2013, and there's a drawing on the ground exactly where the craft landed. It's a painting on the ground, like it's some kind of game or something, a circular pattern right where the circular ET craft landed back in 1968, 45 years earlier. And I I visited that very location in 2013, and I said, what is this doing here? So I think we have to ask, after I was interviewed by the FBI, did that occasion the abduction a year later? I mean, we can assume arguendo that because my dad was, mobbed up with the defense community and actually designing one of the craft to chase the ETs out of our atmosphere, that ostensibly explains why I was being contacted in my bedroom at night, right? But when you look at the FBI investigation in kindergarten, and then in the first grade, I'm contacted and abducted and taken aboard a craft right next to my school. And Joe Humer, the guy who later interviewed me with a pocket watch, the itinerant sort of social studies teacher or language teacher that was working with me, he becomes the principal of that school. We have to ask, which came first? Was I interviewed by the FBI and then turned over the ETs to be abducted in the first grade? Or was it the other way around? Because I believe there is possibly cooperation going on that has been facilitated by the government, or how else could William Tompkins reveal that the Nordics were helping us during World War II? So I think it's not a simple matter of disclosure. It's going to have to involve, if there is real disclosure, full disclosure by the government's going to have to admit, look, we've been working with the ETs. When I asked my dad, he thought when I asked why they wanted to have contact with me when I was introduced to those tall grays on Project Pegasus, he said they wanted to meet some of the children of our project people. What does that mean? That means that Project Pegasus, literally the U.S. time-space exploration program at the time of the emergence of time travel in the defense technical community, had ET human liaison. So it's not just a matter of the government disclosing that we're being visited. They would have to disclose that they've been working with the ETs, at least some of them.
And
some of those 70 species.
Now, we're down to about like 8 minutes left here. This scares me, though, because, this disclosure, we're never going to get the truth. Because how could the government come out and admit this has been going on for 45, 50, 60 years?
Well, let me show you how backwards that is. After I was told about those 4 species in business frequently in 4th grade in 1970, the Honorable Paul T. Hellyer, who was at one point the defense minister for all of Canada, that great country to our north, was given the same briefing 10 years later. The defense minister of a country? So there's been some really weird ordinal kinds of patterns here in who's been getting briefed and why. But in that briefing, let me just to follow on that, he said, and Andy, you are one of those contactees, so you can expect to be visited throughout your lifetime. And the only one I had after like age 12 is I had 3 small grays come into my bedroom at age 18 and look at some scars on my chest. And then a year later, where did I find myself? I found myself up in Northern California training to go to Mars. And isn't it interesting that all 5 of the gentlemen who came forward regarding Project Mars, myself, William Brett Stillings, Bernard Mendez, William Whitecrow, and Ralph Kennedy Johnston Sr., Dr. Ralph Kennedy Johnston Sr., all had contact with the small grays in childhood. So it looks like one of the functions of ET liaison has been to approve Americans who have gone into space, as we did, not by rocket, but by aeronautical repositioning chamber. But why, how else would the ETs know who we were? I mean, 5 out of 5 are damn good odds that they guessed, and I don't think they were guessing. I remember my dad talking about the fact that I was headed for Mars when I was on Project Pegasus. He was kind of in shock, realizing I was going to be going off planet. So I think there's been more work between our government and alien species than we've been told, and that's the primary block to full disclosure.
Yeah, but
I think that
is this contact with, our government, our human species, is it for the good of mankind, or have you come up with, is there a motive behind this? I mean, this is the strange part. I sit here and I think about what is the purpose of all this?
I believe they were concerned about the fact that we were blowing up weapons and we were going into space, and they were studying members of our aerospace community and their children. That has been one of the primary aspects of ET contact that has been completely submerged. Because look, to admit that would be to admit that our nuclear weapons program came to the attention of off-planet civilization. It would indict the very atomic research community that was in possession of time travel. Okay, so it's not an easy disclosure to carry about, because they'd have to say, yeah, and we were aware that they were really becoming concerned about the fact that we had nuclear weapons and we had the rockets and space planes to take them into orbit, to take them out of Earth orbit. They must have been terrified of us. But I'm sure they launched a multimodal program to investigate what we represented as a species. What were our children like? What were those who were going to be going into space, or who were traveling in time space as I was? What were they like? Why were they selected? Because that was a sort of a sidebar to my experiences in Project Pegasus and Project Mars that I've discussed on previous shows and many other shows.
Now, I got
ongoing ET contact.
Now, here's the part. Why would the government go along with it unless they were getting something out of this? Either they're being blackmailed, threatened, or they were given secrets of some
sort. I
sort.
think that we know about that history with the testimony of Laura Eisenhower about her great-grandfather, President Eisenhower, and the work that Alfred Weber's done about that issue. The Greada Treaty involved Eisenhower making a deal with the ETs. You can continue to abduct our citizens as long as you share your technology with us. And that may explain the very derivation of the time travel secrets that led to my training as a chrononaut. Because my dad had said they wanted to meet the children of our project people. That means there was ET human liaison on Project Pegasus. There must have been on dozens of black projects like it. But I don't think it's just a natural phenomenon that hasn't been shared. I think the compromises the government made along the way make it virtually impossible for them to sponsor disclosure, and it's up to those of us who were brought into such classified defense projects to bring it about, and I've been trying to.
Well, yeah, the part that scares me, making any type of deal with creatures or humanoids off-world to be able to kidnap, and remove our citizens of our planet for the betterment of getting secret, information or getting something from the ETs.
Or genetic sharing. And they must have a goal of taking our genes to mix it with other humanoids to create life forms for other planets, and sort of I think that they could have rationalized that by saying, well, that'll allow us to share our genes with humanoids not yet created that are going to be populating the universe.
Well, maybe they're trying
that would be my guess.
Maybe alter our DNA to change our DNA to the point we're not like humans as what we are. Our DNA is changing on a regular basis. And in the last couple of years, it's been really interesting how it's mutating. And scientists don't have any answers for it.
Right. I mean, that's always a danger. And I think that's why the hidden history of the ET question has to be answered. I think it's the most vital question. I mean, the CIA was founded to deal with the ET situation.
Now, our time is up, and on chat, there's a couple people. David wants to know if John Trump was able to develop time travel for his nephew, Donald Trump. Have you ever heard anything like that?
I don't know, but I know that in all likelihood he was on the program. He was working not for the FBI, but for the Defense Department. And I know that Presidents Bush, Clinton, and Obama were briefed. I have personal knowledge of that, so presumably President Trump was as well.
Interesting. Well, our time is up, but, I think this Earth has been rebooted numerous times. Maybe, Andrew, you know what? Maybe there's no humans left. Maybe we are the ETs now.
Well, I know that 87% of our genes are all the same, so that's the best argument against racism that I can think of.
What do you...
87%.
87%. Do you feel that, again, there's talk about false flag, our government setting up a false flag to scare the people, to get control of the population. Do you think any of these ETs are aggressive where they would want to actually not be a false flag, but actually invade our planet?
I think some are. I mean, we're talking 70 species. We're talking about Tompkins confirming the Nordics' involvement with helping the Allies defeat not just the Axis powers, but the reptilians during World War II. Kind of changes the cast of World War II. And I think that because clearly they were working with benevolent ETs, we have to assume that there's also malevolent ones. Absolutely. Look at the abduction, mutilation of Airman Jonathan P. Lowett at White Sands.
Yeah.
So yes, I think that some of them are a danger, but not all of them. So I don't think we can cast everything by the same analysis. I think we have to account for the fact that there will be good, bad, and indifferent, what we've been calling ETs, coming here.
Well, our time is up, Andrew, and it goes always by so fast. Now, in the month of May, we're going to be back into an hour-and-a-half format instead of an hour. And the whole month of May, Andrew, is going to be talking about what we're talking about now. It's going to be UFOs, ETs, Roswell. Do you want to come back in May and we can finish this conversation?
Right, I'd love to. In fact, tonight I was planning originally to talk about different things that the U.S. government's holding back. So the data point from tonight's show is that, look, why would the government be briefing a fourth grader in Morris Plains, New Jersey, that 70 species were visiting our planet and 4 of them most frequently, and yet not revealing that to the American people? Clearly, it was because I was the son of a significant aerospace engineer. And as a result of my dad tracking certain solvent homes, I was being contacted. That's the only reasonable explanation I can find for both the contacts and the way the cover-up was handled in my own life. Why didn't they go on the nightly news and announce that? Why did they wait 10 years to tell the defense minister, the Honorable Paul T. Hellyer of Canada? Okay, so it had to be related to my dad's work.
Okay,
and this is a
Andrew,
major aspect of
I hate to say it, our time is up. I will have JC get a hold of you, and we will set up, for an hour-and-a-half show with you in May, and we can get into this as deep as you want to get into it. How's that?
Right. Well, that certainly covers the data point that's what they knew about ET by 1970.
Okay, Andrew.
I think it was a good snapshot.
You have a good evening, sir.
All right. Take care, Danny.
Okay, my friend.
Jerry.
You take care.
Bye-bye.
Well, we got a great show tomorrow. Who do we have on tomorrow, JC?
Well, let me just say, we have Nick Vellante returning, and he's going to, listen, he's boots on the ground researcher. He's going to tell us some up-to-date new reports on Dogman sightings and events and encounters, some scary ones, and other cryptids also, Gary.
That is going to be really interesting. And next week, who do we have on?
Well, hey, Sunday, we've got Mike Beaver coming on. Now, he has been abducted. He works with abductees and, from A to Z with this whole scenario. So that's going to be a good show also.
Okay. And how about Wednesday and Thursday? Because we're out of time here. Go real quick.
Wednesday, we got Brian Clune coming on. He's He's been to every famous haunted place there is, written many books on it. Thursday, we have Mac Maloney coming on. He's going to be talking about UFOs and wartime. And then on Friday, we have William Warwick coming on talking about UFOs and military cover-ups.
It's going to be a great show starting again from Friday on. So make sure you tell your friends. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do. And give us a thumbs up if you're listening to us on iHeart or any of those. Again, on Apple, please give a good review. Well, till tomorrow. Everybody have a good one.
The Archive Project. We need all government, military, and government contractor witnesses to contact Dr. Greer ASAP at info@SeriousDisclosure.com. That email address again is info@SeriousDisclosure.com. Dr. Greer is archiving his vast trove of documents, witnesses, and UFO cases so they can be shared and give a clear picture of the UFO subject to end the secrecy and establish interplanetary peace. Please join us for our DC conference, June 10th through June 12th, and support us with your donations by going to this website, www.SeriousDisclosure.com. That's SeriousDisclosure.com, spelled SIRIUSDISCLOSURE, SeriousDisclosure.com. Take a journey of adventure and discovery for the enigmatic giants of the forests. Read On the Trail of Bigfoot by Mike Dupler. The author himself describes it this way. Having found possible Sasquatch evidence, namely trees driven into the ground upside down, thought to be territory markers, led me to investigate this creature in my native Ohio. Several years and many forays into Bigfoot territory, I have found incredible evidence, which inspired my book, On the Trail of Bigfoot. Bigfoot is alive and has many fantastic abilities. The evidence is out there for all to see, but you need to know what to look for. My book will inspire those who have answered the call to seek this elusive creature, the Bigfoot. The truth is out there. Read On the Trail of Bigfoot by Mike Dupler. Available now at Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and IndieBound.org.
Desert hills and lonely places, heavy still without your traces, holding on to every breath we wasted, tender for your soft embrace. Don't wanna see the night fade to blue.